Hi, and welcome to the Work in Progress podcast series. I'm your host, Helen Gilbert, Talent and Development Business Partner at Euromonitor. And this episode is an LGBTQ plus crossover, tying in with Pride Month. Our guests will share their career journey along with how they navigate challenges and stay true to their authentic selves. So let me say a big hello to Matt, and if you give us a little bit of an introduction.
So my name is Matt Cameron. I'm the founder and chief executive of LGBT Great and Allied People Group. And we help organisations to create possibilities for talent and to unlock opportunities. And really help to imagine what is possible. One of the great things about the role that I do is obviously talking to lots of different people, lots of different spaces, countries, geographies, and different types of businesses as well. So it's been absolutely fascinating. So hopefully I can bring you some of the insight that I've picked up along the way.
In that case, then I will jump on to the first question. So can you share how your career started at a moment you've had to really back yourself?
For sure. Yes. My career started in October 2009. I did a history degree at the University of Birmingham, was first in the family to go to uni. And I'm originally from a place called Lytham St Anne's, which is near Blackpool in Lancashire. Now, I was the first in the family to also go into the business world and sort of professional world as well. So it was really difficult when I was starting out because I had no connection points with anybody within the world of business. So when I moved down to London with a P-Reg Ford Fiesta and a suitcase and an awful lot of student debt in 2009, I was really lost in terms of how do I get my foot through the door. I didn't know what an internship was. It never really been a concept that had been explained to me before. And, you know, applying to all the graduate roles, as so many do, through these portals, it was really just one knockback and rejection after another. I guess confidence took a bit of a battering in those kind of early days. But what I did do was connect with a recruitment firm at the time that specialised in helping graduates to get their first job. And they really placed people into trainee sales positions. And it just so happened that they sort of clearly saw something in me in terms of, you know, being able to talk and build relationships and perhaps even inspire people. And they got me a whole set of interviews and managed to get the job. But it did involve, you know, talking to and connecting to people that were very different from me and had a huge lack of confidence, imposter syndrome, like, why am I even doing this? Why am I here? Never felt good enough. And in the first year, you know, mentally, it was so challenging because in sales, it takes you time, right, to kind of figure out what to do, how to do it, and how to be effective. And there's a lot of pressure points that come with that as well. Adding in the complexity around, you know, talking very differently from everybody else with a northern accent, although it's not as strong now. I'm LGBTQ plus. I worked in an environment where there was no LGBTQ plus role models or other openly out people. And all of this, you know, kind of has an impact in terms of feeling like the outsider and not quite feeling like you can be 100% of yourself in the workplace. So that was a moment where I really had to, I battled a lot with well-being, poor mental health, self-belief, and it did have a huge impact at the time. But the good news is I did manage to come through that. And here we are today.
And that leads me really well onto the next question. How would you say your personal experiences have shaped how you show up at work as a leader?
You know, for me, I've always really enjoyed people that can help me create vision and inspiration around what is possible. But the one thing that has been lacking, I've either had leaders or managers, right, that have been really good at that or not very good at that, but been really good at like operationally kind of in the present. And what I haven't necessarily always encountered is where there's two things kind of come together. You know, we've got the vision, okay, but how do you actually get there? So what I try and do now in terms of my own team is helping people create that vision for themselves. You know, my leadership style is often very sort of coaching based, very mentorship based. I try and help people think about what is possible. And they might not obviously know, and it's not about telling them the answers, but it's about asking really brilliant questions and creating those spaces where the open conversations can really happen. So I think first of all, you know, it is about, you know, creating that level of connection. Number one. I think the second thing is, you know, around my own lived experience of not feeling seen, not feeling like I can be totally at ease with who I am. And I think this is something that everybody, actually, no matter who you are, what community you're from, experiences at some point. And of course, the acuteness and the level to which we experience that feeling is going to be different based on lots of different factors. But helping people to feel welcome, helping people to feel at ease. So, I try and spend a lot of time in cultivating those open spaces where people can share, people can open up about things that they maybe are struggling with, things that they want to achieve. And I think the third point, building on from that, in also in those moments, is also helping people to be really, really clear on what they are brilliant at. Because sometimes there are times when we just do things right, and we, as individuals, we take those things for granted. But if we actually step back and figure out what it's taken to be able to do that in the moment and be effective at that, whilst it seems like just something that's normal to ourselves, it is actually a really fantastic thing. Simplification, objectivity is what I try and bring to the role that I do, and indeed the approach that I try and have with lots of our wonderful clients as well.
The thing is, coaching is no easy task, especially when you can see the fix to the problem. You can't tell them that. You've got to ask the open questions to get them there. They've got to work out on their own. So props to anyone that can coach in that way, because it is a difficult thing to do and to find the rhythm of for yourself as well.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a skill you get good at. And one of the things I have also learned as well, Helen, throughout my career is that no one teaches you how to be a great manager. No one teaches you how to be a great leader. Of course, there's kind of inputs and things along the way. I believe that it's very much experiential learning. Coaching and training, they play a role. Seeing other people in action as well, role modeling good stuff. And I always say, leadership and management it's an accumulation of all of the experiences, right? And the memories that you put in your box that makes you the person that you are as well. The coaching point, I think, is really interesting because sometimes, even with junior team members, if I'm making a decision or want to, develop some thinking, I sometimes use the phrase, can we just step into coaching mode for a second? And they will coach me. Ask me the questions that you think I need to be, sort of thinking about, and providing that kind of open space. So like reverse coaching, I found to be really helpful, that I think it then normalizes the fact that this is not someone that is senior or a leader or perceived to be empowered doing the coaching. This whole thing, right, is that it takes away that kind of power imbalance, but ultimately provides agency to the team as well. It's perhaps a little daunting to begin with, but it also gives people the validation actually that their thinking and their questions are equally as valid as mine.
I totally agree. I think the fact that previously when you said you invite people into the conversation, you leave space for them to talk, and giving them a chance to have those coaching conversations, but from a reverse point of view, takes away that hierarchy mentality to a degree as well. So it makes them feel comfortable and like builds on that psychological safety between you and that person.
Yeah, definitely. And, a lot of these things I'm sort of saying, I hope don't portray me as the person that thinks he is the best leader in the world, because I can assure you I am really not. And there's still a lot of, mistakes that any sort of leader makes. And I wanted to share a couple of things, that I'm constantly working on for myself, if that's okay with you. I'm a really quick thinker sometimes, and I'll be 5 steps ahead and already on to the next thing, whilst leaving behind thinking and assuming that other people have really, they're really clear on what I've asked or what I've understood. And the reality is that 9 times out of 10, I have moved too quickly. So one of the things that I'm really trying to do at the moment is to make sure I am looking in that rear view mirror to make sure that I have been really clear around things. And that's something that I'm definitely continuously thinking about. I think the other point as well is making sure that, and operating in what is a startup culture like ours, right? The velocity in which we sometimes have to work is really, really high. So sometimes, not providing full briefings on things, or, giving the clarity on what we're asking for, and more importantly, the why. That's burnt me a number of times when a team is like, hang on a minute, can we just back up a second? And what I'm trying to do now is to make sure that I am being open and vulnerable with the things that I know are my sort of blind spots, and making sure that there's some moments, right, where we can pause. So we often talk about insights discovery. Myers-Briggs is another type of the test, but I'm a very red energy person in that, it's high level, it's bullet points, it's move on, it's quick, do it now, get it done type of thing. But a lot of my team are more blue and green energy, right? So it just involves really pausing and thinking for a moment, how are we bringing other people on the journey? And how am I flexing what I want and how I want to operate to make sure that it is inclusive and comfortable for other team members. And I can tell you, as a person that's dominant red energy, that is a really hard thing to do, and you have to be really intentional about it. It does get easier, of course, the more you practice it and learn it. But yeah, these are some of the things that I'm trying to get better at.
I love that self-reflection on your style versus your teams and flexing to them. I think that's a great concept. And also knowing where your weaknesses are is a great way to know where I need to build a skill next, or I need to flex into that kind of thing. So with that in mind then, what values guide how you lead others, especially when things are difficult or under pressure, like you say, high delivery culture?
The first value for me, and thinking about what our company values are, right? Making things happen, I think, is really, really important. And making sure that people are equipped to be sufficiently able to make things happen is absolutely essential now, particularly in the context that you're operating in, as a smaller organization and smaller business. I think the second thing then is really around trust and also transparency. That you have to be able to trust each other. We do what we say what we do, and type of philosophy. I'm really big on integrity as well. I think that's such an important facet of being successful at work, building relationships, building a reputation that you need, and getting other people to sort of buy into you as well. So important. And there's been times, right, where I've worked with other people where I've not felt that value, and I found that quite difficult. So yeah, I think they're probably the big themes that I would mention. But yeah, keen to get your thoughts as well.
I think you can't have trust without integrity. So I think it's a really great thing to have.
Definitely. Yeah. And I also try and instill in the team as well, we are about bringing people together, whether that's organizations, whether that's our peer community. And then the other thing that I think is really in our DNA is, helping to inspire new thinking, new opportunities, new possibilities. And therefore, think bigger is also a key value that we have as an organization. And then finally, learning from every perspective and creating space for that shared learning and different kind of perspectives. And I often say to the team and to many of our clients and the leaders that we talk to is that people are not ever going to agree on everything. And in fact, I think the world that we're in at the moment, they are less likely to agree. So how do we bring in the quiet leadership moments, the empowering leadership moments where everybody feels like they are seen, heard, and valued, and their view or their, whatever it is, that perspective on things is seen? It doesn't mean we agree with it or it impacts a decision, but I can guarantee people really appreciate being asked. And I think thinking about what leadership shadows we're casting, I think are really important. And I just say, Helen, this is a big theme. We've got a big program of work that's launching soon that's going to be looking at these quiet leadership moments. And I'm really sort of fascinated in how we bring great minds and broad minds together to think about, well, actually, what does a vision for inclusion and cohesion look like when we think about 2030, given everything that's kind of happening in the world and the increasing breadth of views, beliefs, backgrounds, diversities that we're seeing within our workplaces. And leadership is going to need to become far more effective to be able to do that. And a lot of that comes from knowing what works and also finally having the confidence to really lead it well.
I haven't heard the term quiet leadership moments or quiet leadership in general. So that's really interested me. So the next question I've got for you then is, what's one small habit or reset that helps you lead better under pressure?
Yes. So I regularly feel pressure. I regularly have those moments of questioning, overthinking why we're doing something or what will someone think about this. And that can become very debilitating and uncomfortable, actually. And there's one thing that a mentor taught me that made a huge difference to me. And that was, again, going back to this concept of those quiet leadership moments. So when I talk about leadership, I'm talking about leadership at all levels. The task that I do is I sit down and I look through the day, I look through the week, maybe even beyond that. And I objectively list the things that have gone well, the things that are leadership moments, the things that are wins, whether it's, the simple thing like we had a really great interaction with a new client. We've left a really positive impression. We've really helped bring people together. We've created space for a person that didn't necessarily know any other LGBTQ plus people in their organization. They're now connected into our community. It might be a client win. It might be a prospect win. It might be successfully helping one of the team with something that they needed. And now they feel confident and that they have everything that they need. So that small habit of sitting down for 5 or 10 minutes and thinking about all of the things that are going well, hugely, hugely helpful. And often what we find as humans, and I don't know if this resonates with any of your listeners or with you, is that when something goes wrong, our brains hyper focus on that one thing and it overtakes everything else that's going on, all of the good things. And we become absolutely fixated, and I do anyway, fixated on that one thing. And we think about only that one thing. And then we think about something else that's negative, and it's a kind of a spiral. And in those pressurized moments, that's where our brains go to. We are programmed as human beings to de-risk, to protect ourselves, to hone in on the things that we think are going wrong or the things that we are afraid of. It's just our natural brain patterns. And for some people, this is more acute than others. And of course, it depends on how we're all wired. But when I get to that zone, I have to take a stop. My phone is switched off. I'm not on email. I'm not on Teams. I sit back. I reflect. I get really objective as quickly as possible on the good things and the reasons why we can. And then I will look at that in context of the things that are making me feel under pressure. And that really helps to rebalance my thoughts and to get me having more positive thoughts, more can-do thoughts. And it takes discipline. And sometimes when you're in that moment, it's really hard to do. But I can tell you by doing that, it changes the game in terms of your mental state and your ability to lock in and to lead. And I think it's hard, right, to really show up well, particularly when you are under pressure. And I can tell you from the last 18 months of doing this work, it's not been easy. It has required a very, very thick skin, huge amounts of tenacity and resilience and those moments. And there still are those moments, right, that feel very, very difficult. But that small habit, going back to your question, that reset moment for me works a little bit like that.
It's like you're inside my brain. What do you mean I hyper-focus on something that's gone wrong? 100%. But I like what you're saying about I call my to-do list a to-do list, because by the time at the end of the week where I scratched everything off, it's like, oh, look what I've done. I mean, it's not my successes, it's just what I've done. So I actually think what your perspective of is like writing down your successes is a great resilience building tool as well. So like when something has gone wrong, you know what, let me go and read my successes for the last couple of months. Okay, this is nothing in the grand scheme of everything I've delivered previously. So it's a great way of resetting your mind and keeping your resilience high in that mindset. So moving on to my next question, what's one leadership behavior or organizational practice that genuinely increases your sense of psychological safety or belonging? And what's changed as a result of that, like practice or behavior?
So, yeah, look, I think it's obviously about creating space, isn't it? I remember the first time that someone that I was working with was noticing that I was not myself. And at the time, I was having a huge crisis moment of being early in my career and not being sure if I wanted to do this anymore. And a lack of belief, lost my mojo, lost my motivation. And of course, as we mentioned before, those thoughts were just sort of spiraling. And there was also the added sort of point, having moved to London, I'd recently split up with my boyfriend at the time that I'd been with for quite a long time. And we moved to London together. And I just remember feeling this huge sense of like loneliness, actually. And, London, whilst it's one of the most vibrant places in the world, right, it's also can be one of the, the most isolating when you're in a busy environment, right? If you don't know anybody, you've not got, connections and things. So kind of all this was kind of happening at work. I was spending a lot of time alone in my head. And the whole thing just escalated to the point where, I stopped really engaging at work. I was sitting back. I was not pushing myself forward. I was opting out of going to the social on a Thursday night. And I just really retreated from myself. And I sort of felt at breaking point at that moment. And I think definitely, look, very poor well-being. Wasn't really sleeping. I had hardly any money at the time either, because as you can imagine, moving to London, the cost of living and everything, it was just really, really hard. And I remember the leadership moment where a slightly more senior colleague said, "Do you want to grab a coffee?" I was like, "Do you know what? I would love to have coffee." And we sat down, and in short, I just literally just burst into tears, and it was awful. But it was a real moment for me of, okay, this needs to be a reset. But something as simple as, do you want to grab a coffee? How are you really? What's kind of showing up for you? Listening to my lived experience, right, of what was happening. And I remember coming away from that moment just feeling like a huge sense of relief. And then this person was amazing. They checked in later on in the day. They'd pop me a note in the evening. They just checked in regularly. And over time, they also started to kind of introduce little things like, "You've got this. You can do this. Look at what you've done here. Look at what you've done there. Things are going to get better." They're going to, give you hope. And over time, gradually, within a couple of weeks, I did start to feel much better. And then I started socializing with people and interacting with people again. And of course, started to get back to myself. So, the leadership behavior, we often think about leadership as this big thing, right? We get taught to do it business schools and by leadership coaches and all the rest of it. The thing that really mattered in that moment for me was, first of all, being asked and the leader or the person creating that space. But the second thing was just the level of empathy that I felt from that person as well. They didn't judge, they listened, they played back to me how they appreciated everything that I was kind of carrying and the huge emotional load and stress of that experience. And it just really, really stuck with me. And we did a piece of research last year, which was called The Power of Allyship and Belonging in the Workplace. And we basically asked 2,500 people in our community and all other workplace communities one question, or centered on one question, but obviously asking quite a lot of questions. But the main point was, how do you experience allyship within the workplace? And the most cited leadership behavior and quality was empathy. And the second thing, ironically, was lived experience, having an opportunity, a space to be invited to share what is showing up for me. And it just really, really stuck with me because of the experiences that, that I sort of described there. We sometimes think leadership, again, is this big thing that is hugely complicated. And I think effective leadership is really, really simple, actually, in terms of formula. And I think being really, really clear on how we can rise to those moments equally, no matter what level we're at in an organization, really makes the difference. I just think sometimes in the crazy busy world that we're in, the simple, do you want to grab a coffee? Are you okay? What's showing up for you? Those moments are so, so powerful. We need more of them. So hopefully that gives you a perspective on my thoughts on that and the thing that really made a difference to me.
It does, because it's a case of actually just being seen. So I think that's a really good perspective. And actually, we know that everyone's busy, leadership as well, but actually just being seen and having time for those people in those struggles or celebrating successes as well.
Yeah, it's the small moments that I genuinely believe they just make a big difference. It's a small thing that you can do that in comparison to the impact that has positively, right, is just huge. But it's becoming conscious in what some of these things are. And here's the big message for today, right? We can all learn to do these things. It's just about getting really clear on really what matters, what works, and thinking about how we can do something great for somebody else and show up for somebody else. And that's what it's all about, right? How are we showing up for each other, no matter what community, what background, what level, any factor? We're all humans at the end of the day. We all have the same set of emotions. Okay, there's different proportionalities in terms of how they show up. But we're all humans, right? We all need that connection. And when we get that connection right with the people that we're working with, the team that we're working with, in the organization that we're working with, these are the things that lead to a sense of connection and a sense of belonging. And I truly believe that these are the things that can genuinely take an organization from good to really, really great. And I'm just fascinated with how we create more of these moments in what is a really difficult world at the moment.
And that leads me really well onto the next question. So, what's one thing leaders often underestimate about how decisions or policies land across different regions, identities, or even lived experiences?
I spend a lot of my time talking to leaders in, as I mentioned before, in lots of different organizations. And I'm going to sort of perhaps bring a different kind of angle to the question, and feel free to butt in if I'm not giving you what you want. But what I pick up from leaders, right, is that the vast majority, if not all, really, really want to show up well. They want to do the right thing. They want to stand by their people. They want to be there for them. They want people to do well. But what they very often feel that within this space, uncertainty around how to do it, fear around maybe asking the wrong question, saying the wrong thing, and causing unintended consequences or harm to a person. And the contradiction here is that when we think about senior leaders, our natural assumption, right, is that they're in a position of influence and a position of relative power, decision-making capacity, because they are really good at what they do. They've been selected to be in that position. So we naturally think that they know everything, right? And they are expected to have all the answers and to always get things right. And leaders, even though that a lot of leaders know that's not the case, they still unconsciously carry that level of pressure because they know that sometimes this is kind of the perceived expectation. And I think that's a real challenge. So I think the one thing I would say on this is that leaders, they also need support, right? To do this work really, really well and to be constantly feeling able to create those spaces where they can listen. And this brings me on to kind of the second sort of thought that I've got for you on this particular question, is that I have seen organizations and leaders that have been, really, really effective at getting the right policies in place, really challenging at senior leadership level and maybe even above, advocating for something that is going to help employees, whether that's looking at, sort of things like policies and provisions for well-being, mental health, and menopause, trans and non-binary policies, these sorts of things. And these policies that they go through, they're bold, they are brilliant. But actually, one of the things that I think that how we then make that policy a reality is it's the quiet leadership moments, right? Where we really bring that to life. So one of the things that I really try and help our leaders and senior leaders to really think about is, how often are you creating those spaces where you can listen? And when we bring that back to kind of LGBTQ plus work and networks, I think it's really important at the moment that, senior sponsors do invite people in to share their thoughts if they wish to do so, of course. Have an open door. If there's things that are really impacting you, then, we'd love to understand and explore and kind of confirm what they are. I'm not saying that talent expects senior leaders to have all of the answers or change things necessarily, but it goes back to that point, doesn't it? People really appreciate the space to be heard and to share. So I think that's kind of how I'd probably approach that, is that policies are great, brilliant, let's get them done. For me, they're kind of the basic, it's the foundations, it's the minimum. But it's then how we bring those to life and how we make those, a reality. And, by providing those listening circles and really active listening, one of the most underestimated skills in leadership is, are we providing those regular spaces to check in, to listen? And in those moments, are we really displaying empathy? And are we doing that authentically? And I think that's kind of the one thing that I think a lot of businesses and leaders tend to underestimate, is the power of doing those things alongside the policies and the decisions that are being made around more perhaps organizational best practice related matters.
Definitely. I think having those conversations helps build the culture as well. So your company culture will evolve as that happens as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so on to my next question then. So thinking about psychological safety and inclusion, what's one practical thing that people at any level could do to create more transparency, trust, and open dialogue, especially for those that don't feel safe by default? So basically, what can anyone do to help those actions? And I suppose if you're one of those people that are in a minority and you don't feel safe, what can they do?
Yeah, so I think, the essence of this question is around how do we foster a speak up culture where people do feel able to share and raise something that is impacting them or matters to them. And I think leaders need to role model those behaviors and to really be visible in how appreciative and helpful sharing is to helping them to understand really what's at play and what is going on. And role modeling, coincidentally, is really where an LGBT Great first started. If you can see people like you, it has a huge impact, right, on how we experience inspiration, motivation, belief that we can also do the same things. And when it comes to behaviors, there's a whole school of sort of psychology sort of on this. But, if we see positive behaviors being praised visibly, there's a concept called vicarious reinforcement, whereby it then leads to other people starting to emulate those said same behaviors. And this can work in a positive way, of course. It can also work in a negative way. So I guess in the workplace, what I'm kind of saying is if a leader is also being vulnerable in things that they may be sharing, or creating those spaces where it is an ask me anything type of conversation, I think that can be really, really powerful. And of course, making sure that if someone has shared something with you and you want to talk about that, of course, you need to be 100% clear that the person is comfortable sort of with that. But I think by role modeling, sharing and speaking up on things and thanking people for that visibly, I think is a really great way in which we can cultivate more of that happening. A second answer to your question, if you've got somebody that is really, not comfortable in doing that, you're going to have those personalities that are really comfortable, that overshare. You're going to have those people that sit back, don't say much. And they're the folks, right, that you need to spend a little bit more time with, or not more time with, but different tactics, right, in reaching out to them, the follow-up. They might be in a meeting and they've not shared a thought or a view, and you want to follow up with them to say, just want to check in with you. So again, you're cultivating that. But a lot of it is around, we talk about instinct in leadership as well, don't we? Reading the room and things. But these are some of the techniques, the role modeling, the vicarious reinforcement, knowing your team, and the power of the follow-up to seek out one-to-one and make a person feel heard and valued. Really, really powerful. And equally sometimes, one of the things that I've learned to do is to check in with people before a meeting happens. Just want to check in with you. These are the things that I'd like to discuss in the meeting. What do you think? Is there anything else that you would like to approach in the meeting? Have you got any different thinking? That would be really helpful just for me to understand. So I think, it's the quiet leadership moments, isn't it, that we go back to, that, again, really help people to feel more psychologically safe. And I think, for underrepresented communities where maybe they're in a room or in an environment where there is less of them, and naturally there is, because typically they're underrepresented, we do know that there is a direct linkage there to quite often experiencing lower levels of self-belief, lower levels of confidence, and therefore the direct impact, of course, is that maybe a little less likely to speak up or to share. So I think, the intuition and instinct of the leader to be thinking and picking up on this, it's really important. But these are some of the techniques that I think can be really helpful. I know in parts in my career, I also made a real difference to me as well.
Well, I think they're really great points to put focus on, and actually that builds that trust, and that's something that everyone can do. So even if you're not in a leadership point of view, if you're having a meeting with someone and there's a group of people, you can still do that sort of action. It lands really great if it's from a leadership perspective, because like you say, people will mimic those behaviours.
Definitely. And it's around getting to know each other, isn't it? And figuring out how different people are programmed and wired. We all have our unique differences, and some of that is around our diversity of thoughts and cognitive diversity, and other aspects relate to our backgrounds. Other aspects relate to our identities. That there's so much that kind of goes into this. And I think one of the key things I'd like people to take away today is that there's so much that goes into making each of us who we are beyond, one category or one thing. And I think that breadth of approach, right, which is why inclusive leadership is such a vital skill, not only for our senior leaders, but also for all colleagues.
Definitely. It's like it's part of your identity, but it's not your full identity. There's multiple elements to it. We're all complex characters.
And we've all got our stuff going on, right? Sometimes we don't see it. Other people don't see it. So, it's just being really open. And I'm very fascinated in behaviors and why people react to things or say things or want to do, and taking time to think about what's behind that, I think is really important. So, yeah, again, something that I'd recommend is just taking sometimes those quiet pause moments just to sort of think through. I think it can be really helpful.
I love that. So that was my last question. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I mean, I always enjoy a good chat anyway, but it's been really insightful, and I've definitely got things that I'll be taking away from this. Big floating moments, quiet leadership moments.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the time and the invitation and to do this with you, Helen. So, yeah, on behalf of me and the team, thank you very much.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And for everybody else, keep an eye out for the next episode. Thanks. Bye.